buongiorno a tutti.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I thank you for inviting me and for having this opportunity to speak in this conference. My presentation relates to what has already been said by Mr. Costello and Mr. Pasquera, but with a specific approach as a psychologist working for a public facility concerned with foreign unaccompanied children. We stipulated a memorandum of agreement with doctors with no frontiers for victims of crimes and tortures and of violence. So I will reflect on these on this issue. I will make some observations on this issue, and then I will talk from a psychological point of view. I gave a title, Time for Migration and Time for Justice. This is the title of my presentation. I think that when we deepen the issues concerning the relation between justice and the foreign unaccompanied children, we have to consider the time of the migration paths of people coming from other worlds. And this time aspect is within the historical moment that concerned the immigration flows from Tasmania in search of assets and from the entry of migrants into Western countries, lands of illusions after the horrors written on the body of everyone. So we consider this time and we can understand what children, boys and girls coming from other worlds pushed the boys and girls to leave their own country and their affections did not prevent them from leaving the country. There is nobody, there is nothing to keep them in their countries. Colonial policies gave no power to social structures, and there are no symbolic links of populations with respect of rules, their internal systems, the recognition of their authority within a social context in which they were recognized. The virtual world gave some illusion images through the internet, and so they shared some different cultures, some different livings, far from their customs and habits. So the exchange of information through videos, texts, images did not have rivals in terms of the traditional message concerning the symbolic systems of a population. And so in this respect, that there is no tradition, there is no people's culture, because the colonial policies created violence, and there are religions and cultures that do not belong to dominated populations. Gabizza in Arabic means the expedition of army, the incursion in an enemy country in order to devastate animals and people. So this word, and I wanted to share with you the root, is strictly linked to Nazism. That is to say, the concept based on the principle of a superior human race. And against the genocide. And so there is the absolute predominance of a superior race. So these terms of race and racism allow us to include their use in the legislation, because in certain states the legislation is against racism and the racial laws. For example, the apartheid. The history of United States of America showed this in the past and still today. Racism, a complex set of manifestations, intolerances expressed through form of marginalization and scorn towards groups belonging to different ethnic minorities is hidden in legislation, in law articles, but also in the intellectual convictions within anti-racist laws promulgated in most states. Starting from the 1940s, UNESCO allowed to create a movement in order to cancel all these race prejudices. Thanks to the Declaration of the Man, Article 2 recognizes the freedoms without any distinction of race, color, sex, religion, language, or political opinion. So this principle was recovered, as already said by Mr. Costella, by the European Convention of the Human Rights in 1950 and the Convention of 1966 and the European Constitution at the end of 2004. So migrants or minor migrants or adult migrants who escape their country because of extreme poverty conditions or because of ethnic wars that cannot be managed by any social system. So these migrants cope with an Italian legislation system that ensures guarantees, because there are the rights of the child according to the convention transposed into Italy, but very often they have bureaucratic difficulties and they see the traumatic scenarios that they lived. And so they have these in their memory and they altered the vision of their life. So before the territorial commissions for the recognition of the international protection, those who give their witnesses, they have a double aspect. That is to say, they have to tell their migration history, they have to tell their truth, and they can be subjected to an assessment in order to obtain the residence permit. But telling the truth has a therapeutic value, but it also involves a political value as for any witnesses. And so the dimension cannot always be public, private, and legal. And so what is the value that we should give to the experience of narration and to the reasons, that is to say, the narration of the trauma concerning the reality of the experience lived, or if this is due to the level of truth, a series of words, and the person can represent his or her.
Le commissioni territoriali sono chiamate a valutare l'attendibilità dei fatti narrati e le esperienze vissute, sancendo spesso con le loro
This dichotomy is at play when territorial commissions have to assess whether the history told by the migrant is reliable or not. Intentional trauma is the so-called induced trauma, a trauma that was created by human beings by their ideological constructions or beliefs. These are nothing else but their expressions, a way to represent their concept of the concept of their relationship with the others, based on violence, on exploitation. The power of trauma, therefore, is telling us that the system is not human system. So if foreign children in Italy enjoy the right of education, health assistance, a safe place to live, guardianship if their parents are not able to be with them. At the same time, they are subject of assessment, of investigations, of judgments as to their reliability and as to their behavior since they arrived in Italy. So if on one hand, children cannot be sent back to their countries, on the same time, if there are reasons of public order and security, they can be expelled. The application has to be assessed by the juvenile court in a very timely way, within 30 days. So what may be the causes for a child to be expelled? For example, it could the child may feel to be fully misunderstood, that his questions are not taken care of, and his needs are not properly met by the center's workers. Centers workers are often lack proper training, so they often have to call police in order to contain, for example, as an aggressive behavior of a child who feels to be misunderstood or not understood at all, who even feels to be tortured and suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder caused by his previous life experience, his experience at sea. Now, to conclude these reflections on the subject of justice, migrants, and their acceptance in Italy, I would like to explain once again what I said before by talking about Rasoul. He is a child from Senegal. he was reported to the clinic for unaccompanied foreign children where I work. He was reported for some aggressive behavior and for not abiding by the rules of the center where he was living. He is a Muslim, speaks Wolof, and Rasul, until he was 8 years old, he lived with his family, his father, who was a farmer, a housewife mother, and other 3 brothers. When he was 8, he actually became more independent of his family, and he wanted to spend his free time, with friends rather than working. So he was entrusted by his father to his own brother, in other words, to Rasul's uncle. But the education and corrective methods applied by his uncle were highly violent. Rasul was beaten many times, and he was treated differently from his cousins. And obviously, these education systems did not work at all with him, but he tried to accept the decision by his fathers. Rasul never mentioned to him, when he was able to talk to his father, never mentioned what was happening to him in his uncle's house. And he never mentioned that he wanted to go back home. Then, as soon as he had grown up and was able to face his uncle, he was invited to leave. Again, it was another rejection, the same rejection he had already received from his father and his original family. Hence, he decided to leave his uncle's house without any plan ahead of him. Since then, he broke all his ties with his families. In Libya, he stayed there for 10 months, and he was in prison twice. The second time when he tried to reach Italy on a rubber boat. He was caught by Libyan police, and he was brought back to prison, where he underwent physical violence, and he was subjected to the so-called falaka, beating on his feet. He tried the second time he tried to reach Italy. He succeeded because his rubber boat was rescued and he was brought to the port of Messina. Once he was assigned to the first acceptance center, Rasul actually showed all symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. He was always angry. He could not tolerate any request he was asked to do, any request that carried an authoritative tone. At night, he had nightmares where he would relive all the previous violence. But this behavior he had was in contrast of the other psychoeducational projects proposed by the center. The objective actually aimed at an integration, but this integration did not mean that it was really accepted by the community. So Rasul started to go from center to center, and nobody actually understood that whenever the police was called in, and whenever it was decided to move him to another center, all this would actually increase his PTSD disorder, and nobody actually understood what Rasul's feelings were actually in all this process. In addition to this, all moves from center to center never considered Rashid's needs, Rashid's demand. Rasul, with his action, was getting to a worse situation from time to time. Hence, he ended up to our clinic, where we tried to try and show that we were supporting him. We were on his side. We did not want him to follow schooling or to attend school, etc., etc. We just wanted to be with him. We just wanted to show that we were at his side. Many times, even if we were not physically in presence with him, we would just text him or send him a picture. All this was very helpful for him, because he, in this way, felt to be supported. One day, in his WhatsApp profile, he posted a photo where the name of one of us had been written on the beach, on the sand. In August of last year, Rasul actually was finally heard before the so-called territorial committee. And only 20 days ago, the committee answered his application. So Rasul was believed, and Rasul was not believed, and his international protection application was rejected. At this point, Rasul said that he did not want to continue with an appeal. He had been confirmed that his words were meaningless, that nobody would believe him. Rasul came to visit us a couple of times later. He was very much disappointed at what had happened, but he said, "I don't need anybody. I don't need anything to live." But sometimes he was really desperate. After almost 3 weeks, the community's manager told us that Rasul had not come back to the center. We haven't heard from him anymore. There was only one picture we saw on a social network that the center manager showed us. He is away from Sicily. At least we were happy that he was still alive. But again, Rasul will still be with us. We will always remember him, because of what was decided by our governments, by our leader. All these persons, they are marginalized, and they are placed in very difficult conditions, and they have to feel the shame of not being accepted by the community.